Hello everyone, welcome to the 7th Brazilian Congress of International Tax Law, promoted by the Brazilian Institute of Tax Law. The IBDT is a non-profit association founded in 1974 by Professor Rui Barbosa Nogueira with the purpose of developing tax law in Brazil. Today, IBDT is a reference in international tax law, offering both a specialization and master's degree on international tax law. This year's Congress has three main subjects: BRICS and new technologies, impacts of the US tax reform on OECD and developing countries, and finally, recently developments in international tax law. In order to provide an in-depth analysis of these subjects, each panel is structured as follows. A foreign professor introduced the main issues related to each subject, and afterwards, other speakers, Brazilians and foreigners, will provide some commentaries and share his country's experience on the subject. We hope you enjoy.
Senhoras e senhores, estamos iniciando a terceira sessão. Tributação de serviços na fonte. Temos compondo a mesa desta sessão, Dr. Gilberto de Castro Moreira Júnior, coordenador e professor do mestrado de Direito Tributário Internacional do IBDT, e preside esta mesa. A doutora Licelot Cana, funcionária da Administração Tributária do Chile, Dr. Ricardo Mariz de Oliveira, presidente do IBDT, professor Vikram Chand, Universidade de Lausanne, também o professor Brista Tsao, Universidade Central de Finanças da China, professor Vitor Machekin, Academia de Direito de Kutaisi, em Moscou, e a doutora Jennifer Roosevelt, professora da Universidade da Cidade do Cabo. Iniciando então com a palavra ao Dr. Gilberto de Castro. Obrigado.
Boa tarde a todos. Em primeiro lugar, eu queria agradecer o convite que me foi feito pelo EDT, na pessoa do Ricardo, e do Chueri, e estou muito contente de estar novamente no Congresso Internacional do IBDT, e como já estamos assim um pouco atrasados, eu vou passar diretamente já para os palestrantes a palavra, para que nós possamos ouvir as opiniões e depois os comentários dos BRICS a respeito da tributação na fonte. Com a palavra, a professora Lizelot.
Obrigada. Thank you very much. And of course, I also want to thank Professor Chueri and Professor Mariz de Oliveira for the invitation to be here, and not only for me, but in the sense that I think we all want to thank them, because I think this organization has really been excellent and really interesting to exchange different views and technical issues discussed in this forum. I wanted to take the opportunity to perhaps talk a little bit about the participation in the OECD, a bit of the leftovers from the last panel. I had a word with Thomas Balko, and he's okay with his comments. Just for all of you, G20 was part of the BEPS project. So we're not talking about an OECD standard. We're talking about a G20 standard. And the people sitting there being full participants with full way of incorporating their views was the whole BRICS panel, which is seated here. South Africa was there, Brazil was there, Argentina was there from our region. Yes, Luis? Russia was there. So just for your, that is actually the setup. G20 had full participation and was sitting as equal members at the OECD, setting the standards of the BEPS. Once the BEPS standard was set, a new word started, which is the inclusive framework. The inclusive framework is like of United Nations, basically. 1.5 years ago, the 100th member became Vietnam. So at CFA, at the inclusive framework meetings now, we are more than 100 countries that actually set our standard settings. In our meetings at WP1 and WP6, the ones that we represent here, I go to the CFA inclusive framework meetings and to WP1. There could actually be members participating with full participation of countries who have committed to the minimum standard, and that is more than 100 countries today. So, membership for Brazil, I'm not really sure, perhaps I shouldn't say that, but I'm not really sure why. Because you have been sitting there as a full participant for many years now. Now, I understand also that this is policy things and you want to perhaps have other standards, etc., and it's not only tax, of course, the OECD. So I think there could be other issues involved in there. Anyway, so I think just for all of us to be clear, the inclusive framework is now the standard-setting body where, we are meeting in Paris. It's an OECD meeting place, but it's called inclusive framework and not OECD standard. Now, also a little bit of a comment from a leftover panel yesterday. As a participant in WP1, I actually was chairing the Action 7 of the BEPS project. I'm not really sure why I became a chair, unless one sort of I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Professor Luthi from Switzerland, who was chair of WP1. He told me once and I call it the Luthi principle. And the Luthi principle is that if you talk too much in meetings, you will be a chair, because that's the only way to keep you quiet. So applying the Luthi principle, I do understand why I was chosen to be the chair of Action 7 at WP1. Well, the result of that work, it was, as you know, the PE standard in Article 5. And just to defend it a little bit, because yesterday we were looking at the numbers of between 200 plus treaties being affected by MLI. But I think the important thing is that I think the countries that are members of the OECD, I'm really not sure about the other 65 inclusive framework members, but there's only 4 countries of the OECD who's actually reserved their position on 4.1. And those are very strange countries, actually. It's like Sweden, Finland, and then perhaps you can understand a bit more, Switzerland and Luxembourg. But it's a very strange combination of countries who have reserved their positions against paragraph 4.1. Against paragraph 5, we have 5. To the 4 before I mentioned, we added Germany. And then against paragraph 6, we have only 3 countries who have reserved a position. That's Finland, Sweden, and Luxembourg. So of all the countries, even though they didn't sign up to MLI, on the changes of Article 5, they are willing to renegotiate their tax treaties. And I think that it's an important point that we shouldn't forget. So, having made those comments, I'm now going to try and talk a little bit about source taxation. Chile being probably the OECD member that have more source taxation in its treaties, and probably the least one who should be chairing Action 7. But anyway, so I suppose let's get on with it. First of all, in order to have source taxation, you have to make sure that you can tax it under domestic law. So I will go very quickly through here. You can see, under domestic law, could be, because it's physically performed in your country. In our case, there are different things here mentioned on my slide. In Chile, we tax everything that's paid from Chile. So we have a really good position in order to apply tax treaty negotiations. We can actually reduce our scope of taxing services because we tax everything. Services is basically paid for by a resident or a PE. So that's our source taxing rules. Countries have different rules, but you have to have a right to tax in your country before you can actually start talking about negotiating different rules for treaty. Now, where are we on treaty nexus? There are different positions taken by countries. For instance, one of the rules, Article 7 applies, and that's the OECD model approach. It's still treated as business profits. You have a fixed place of business. That's the threshold. And basically, you are taxed net on the attributed profits. The other way that we have a treaty nexus is when you additionally apply a time threshold, and that would be the deemed service PE in Article 5.3b, which is the UN approach. I put net taxation of attributable profit here. That's basically most countries' views, but there are different views on this. Some countries also are of the opinion that there should be gross taxation here. Or the fixed base or 183-day rules in Article 14. So those are the additional rules. Then we have what we now have, the new rules, especially the Article 12a, withholding tax, the royalty treatment tax, where you apply the income to technical services or technical assistant. If you're going to use Article 12, which is, I think, is the Brazilian approach, you can add it specifically as we have in the Chile-Brazilian tax treaty, we have in the protocol that technical assistance and technical services are to be understood as part of royalty payments, under Article 12. You also have this difficult issue between know-how and the extension of the royalty definition in Article 12. So there is different countries who have different views of what is a service, technical service under supply of know-how under Article 12 without this specific application of technical services like we have in our treaty with Brazil. We also have the new Article 12a, which is the UN new article, which I'm going to go to into a little bit more of detail later on. So a little bit about the UN. First of all, the UN committee, which I was part of for 9 years, is a committee of experts that are nominated by their countries, but they are appointed by the Secretary General in their personal capacity. This is a big difference from the OECD committees, because in the OECD committees you are actually acting as a government official, you represent your country. At the UN, the committee members sit with their personal names. And in fact, you know, the members of the committee, they are never addressed as under their countries, they are addressed by their names. So it's a little bit of a different setup, and of course that has implications for the wording of the model. There's no reservations, there's no observations, and that makes it very difficult actually to draft the commentaries to the UN model, because it has to reflect everyone's views, because no one can say, okay, the consensus was X, but I can put my view at the end like you can at the OECD model. So it makes the drafting, makes the work very difficult. I was part of the work of the 2011 update, and when I started, which was about 2004, 2005, there was a subcommittee ongoing, which was the Permanent Establishment Subcommittee. The subcommittee had a mandate to revise the Article 5 and see if it should be changed. And I thought also part of that discussion was if the elimination of Article 14, like the OECD model, because as you know, much of the UN model is sort of copying of the OECD model. Basically, I think I can say that without hesitation, because many of the participants in the group are from OECD countries. And that is a little bit the problem as well, because the UN committee, of course, has a split in ECOSOC terms, 25 members that should sort of have half developing countries and half developed countries. But developing countries are counting countries like some Arab countries who has a lot of money. So they are actually more residence-based than OECD countries. So if you look at the models from, for instance, Qatar or some of these countries that are counted for the UN as developing countries, in fact, they are much more interested in maintaining residence taxation than some OECD countries. So this difficulty in the split of the persons that represents as members of the UN committee makes it a little bit difficult sometimes to perhaps look and do things for really developing countries in the sense that needs more source taxation. Anyway, so elimination of Article 14 was discussed, and that's where I started to participate in the work. And as a start off, just have a look at paragraph 1 of Article 14. Income derived by a resident of a contracting state. What is a resident according to the definition? Individuals and companies. Or no? No. The UN model says no. They say that the enterprise, in respect of the furnishing by services, and this is the commentary to Article 14, they should be taxed in accordance with Articles 5 and 7. So we had a huge debate between those who thought that Article 14 would apply to individuals and companies, and those who thought it should only be individuals. Now, why is this important? It's important because if you look at this slide, for the same or connected project, what some countries wanted to do, they wanted to tax services under 14 because 5.3b, which is the article that would apply for services in Article 5, actually reduced the scope of application because it said for the same or connected project. That was the original UN model. So what countries who didn't have, perhaps the service was 2 months here, 2 months there, and not for a connected project, they preferred to tax under 14. So the whole discussion was, so let's see if I can go back now. Yes, it's working really good. So the scope of 14 was really important. Now, this change in the 2011 model came as a new paragraph 11, and I tell you, you read this one, and don't know how many gray hairs you can see on my head, but part of my wrinkles and my gray hair comes from those little words there. Because I tell you, to change the model of the UN, to get those words in there, to show that not everyone agreed with that statement, was basically aging me very hard. Anyway, so after the 2011, it was agreed we're going to keep Article 14, and we're going to recognize in the model that not everyone agrees that 14 only applies to individuals. Having done that, these are the reasons why I sort of get a little bit upset sometimes, because the US representative at the committee refused to recognize that enterprises could be treated under 14, when the US model to 96 actually specifically dealt with the problem by reducing the scope, and they saying particularly derived by an individual who is a resident. They changed the Article 14 to make sure, because they knew that resident is defined as individuals and companies. So if you want to really reduce the scope, that's the way to do it, and the US had done it in this model. So that was not recognized by a member of the committee, which was from the US, but such is life. It's also quite clear, if you see the optional position in the OECD model, as you may know, in paragraph 144 of the 2017 OECD model, there is an option to include services if you apply the OECD model. This comes after some court cases was upset some members of the OECD, and they couldn't agree on including it in the model, but they gave it at least as an option. Now here it is clear that you have to be present in the country and perform the services, because that's the next issue that we discuss. If if we read this article, this is 5.3b from the UN model, the furnishing of services, including consultancy services, by an enterprise through employees or other personnel engaged by the enterprise for such purpose, but only if activities of that nature continue, and let's take away the for the same and connected project because that's not important anymore, within the country for a period or periods aggregating more than 183 days. Do we actually have to have a presence here? I want to read that phrase, and how many of you think, I want a show of hands, because I use this in my classes and I want to have a show of hands, please help me here. Do you think that this paragraph means that the employees has to be present in that country where the activities take place? Who thinks yes? Okay, who thinks no? We won, yes. Great. The thing is, there's nothing here that says that those employees has to be present. Now, if you look at the OECD model, they made sure that the presence is there. And it says who is present in the other state for a period. Because what happened is when the OECD studied the text for the incorporation in its commentary, they looked at the UN model. Of course they did. But of course they realized that there's a problem with it. That's why they didn't choose it. They choose this wording, which made clear that there's a presence and that the work is actually taken part by those employees present in that other country. So, I think activities of that nature continue. We were in a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was an IFA conference where Ariane Pickering was doing enterprise services, and she gave us the example of employees going to another country, installing a camera and going back. And, I think in that report you can read how many countries actually agrees with no required presence, physical presence. Of course, there was the camera still there, and the camera was taking part in the activity, and perhaps you can argue that that's a paragraph 1 of Article 5, permanent establishment. But for our future purposes, I think that we really have to be very careful about this, because the activities take place without a physical presence by employees, I think is one of the things that we can in the future have a look at digital services. So just let's see how we came to Article 12. We studied services beginning with a mandate of 2009, the committee of 2009. That mandate was very broad. We were given an extremely broad service to study all aspects of service cross-border services. I was chairing that subcommittee, and we had a note prepared. We didn't manage to have any results for the 2011 update, which is basically ready 2010. So we made sure in the 2011 update, if you look at the introduction, we were saying that we are going to continue the work on services. And in 2012, in the October meeting, we did have a paper. If you're interested in all these documents, they are on the website of the United Nations by meeting. So these are all available for you if you're interested to read them. There was 9 options to dealing with technical services. In that meeting, we actually had a participant from China who did a very interesting paper, and it's also on the website. As a professor from China who was asked by the Chinese delegate, Tishong Lao, to prepare a draft text to study services. And it was a very broad subject, and he included digital services in his paper. Now, in that meeting in 2012, we just realized that that was just too much for the UN to take on board. And by talking to our colleagues, what was really required was a sort of our African colleagues what they really needed was a technical service article. That's what they had in their sort of in the models of Africa, and they pushed for that issue, and we just realized that taking on digital economy by the UN was just not going to be going very far, because at the same time the OECD was starting to move, and we knew that we were going to not be able to conclude very much if we went for too much. You know, it's as the saying going, if you open your mouth too much, you probably lose the whole thing. So we went for a new article dealing with technical services, and this article, which I'm going to look a little bit at it, but you can read it for yourself. It's basically like a royalty article, like Article 12. There's no threshold requirement, there's no PE presence, there's no such things, and it's not also, it's quite wide in its scope, because it's not required to have it within the territory of anyone. It could be a service given from anywhere, really. So this is very quickly the scope of the articles, the paragraph. The first paragraph is the scope of the article. And of course, it's the setup as a royalty article. The source state may also tax. There's a definition of technical services. There is the throwback rule that we all have in Article 10, 11, and 12. There is a source rule, and it's also an article, a paragraph, sorry. What is not source for services, and there's the typical anti-abuse provision. I just wanted to give a little bit of a flair for how the Article 12 works together with Article 14. So I put this little example up here. This engineer, Mrs. C, she writes a report that can be regarded as a professional service in Article 14, but it can also be regarded as a fee for technical services under 12A. How is this Mrs. C taxed if she is present in State A for 190 days and if she is present in State A for 160 days? So, well, applying Article 14 and 12A, in the B case, she would be taxed under Article 12A, which is a royalty withholding. If she's present in State A for 190 days, she would be taxed under Article 14. And it could also, of course, be if she's has a fixed base in State A, she would also could be taxed in State A. So that's the overlap between 14 and 12A and how it's resolved. Also, to treat very quickly other options in the UN commentary, this was very hardly fought. There was great resistance from countries or members, because we're there in our private capacity, but sometimes the views from our countries makes us a little bit more strongly opposed and in favor sometimes. So we had a very sort of strong minority view from developed countries that really hated this article, and they fought for many years, but we managed to get it through. But we had to negotiate and include minority views in the commentaries. So there is a minority view which is basically based on the India-US tax treaty, where they also treat services in a certain way. There's also an option for which we also thought was going to be possible if you wanted to reduce the scope a little bit from 12A, in that if you wanted to be treated only for services performed in the other state. Because if you remember, I said that it's actually applying to any service performed anywhere in the world. So we used that as an option as well for those countries who wanted to do that. So there's like two options: the minority view, which is in Article 12, and the option where you can reduce the scope of Article 12A is in 12A itself. As you saw as well, we had the other option in the OECD commentary. I showed you that, and I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Just very quickly, this is my last slide. So this is Chile's experience of taxing services. First of all, as I said, we have very wide domestic rules on apply, and we can tax services, any payment that goes out from Chile. Our first treaties with Canada and Mexico included some very wide scope in Article 14, basically a sort of Article 12A, I would say. Then we had a second group of countries where we had the Article 5, the deemed PE, modified because we never accepted the same and connected project scope in Article 5.3b. If you remember in the slide that I had earlier, the same and connected project actually reduces the scope quite a lot in Article 5.3b. And just as adding now, the UN Model 2017 eliminated that scope in Article 5.3b. So in fact, it's more closer now to what we do in Chile. We never have any of our treaties included the same and connected project. And we also have a modified UN model where we use the same principles. So for us, what we do, we modify Article 14 to actually apply it to individuals, and as the US Model Treaty. And in Article 5.3b, we eliminated the scope of same and connected projects, so we have the same scope of Article 5.3b to 14. Then we also have a later group, which is United Kingdom and Spain, where we for first time eliminated Article 14, but then we include personal activities as a 5.3c. So we include individuals under 5.3 as a special paragraph. So those are the experience that we have. It will be very interesting to see how the UN committee carries on the work from the mandate that still is applicable for the subcommittee on services. One of the things that they can think about, of course, is just to add digital services to Article 12A. That would be a very easy way of solving problems, but perhaps not very easy to agree on. So thank you very much.
Agradeço a excelente palestra da professora Eliselotti e o professor Vikram gostaria de fazer uma pergunta. Question, please.
Sorry, I just had a question with respect to the view that you expressed on the interaction between the service PE clause. Yeah. So on the interaction between the service PE clause and the new clause on Article 12A, so the interaction between 5.3b and Article 12A, because for 5.3b, what I understood, your view is that you don't need to be physically present in the state of source in order for you to trigger a service P. So even if you operate remotely from the state of residence and you provide services in relation to a project in the state of source, you trigger a service P. Is that your position? And then how would you
yes,
like, overlap with Article 12?
Yeah, no, my only problem is that I'm a public official, so I'm speaking in my personal capacity now, because this is not an official view from, the only one who can interpret Chilean tax law is the commissioner, and he hasn't given his view on this yet. So just from my point of view and reading the text, and I think, as I was very pleased to see, I think the majority of people here as well think that you don't need to have a presence in 5.3b as it's worded at the UN model today. So it overlaps, it basically overlaps. And so you have the throwback rule in 12A4.
Which throws you back to 5.3b and to Article 7.
Yeah.
Bom, agora passo a palavra ao professor Ricardo, que vai falar um pouco a respeito da experiência brasileira.
Muito obrigado. Boa tarde a todos. Quero registrar minha alegria de estar dividindo o trabalho aqui com a professora Cana e os demais professores de tantos países. Espero que nós, tratando desse tema, consigamos repetir o sucesso dos painéis anteriores. Eu vou realmente fazer uma análise diferente da feita pela professora Cana, porque eu vou apenas analisar as implicações brasileiras da tributação de serviços e, especialmente, de serviços técnicos. O título desse painel, The Taxation of Service at Source, ele é dúbio, né? É como se nós falamos no Brasil, uma pegadinha do professor ou do organizador da parte científica do Congresso. Aliás, eu queria complementar que está muito bem organizada. Mas é uma pegadinha, porque quando se fala Taxation of Services at Source, eu posso pensar em duas coisas: a tributação do serviço em si ou a incidência do imposto de renda na fonte sobre serviços prestados por terceiros. E eu vou analisar as duas coisas aqui rapidamente, dentro do espaço de tempo que eu disponho. Não, por outro lado. Eu queria começar registrando aqui, voltando um pouquinho para os temas de ontem, né? Um pouquinho, ou bastante, para os temas de ontem, para poder entrar diretamente depois na questão específica dos serviços. Nós não temos no Brasil um IVA ou um VTA que seja, VAT, desculpa, que seja abrangente de todas as operações. Nós temos aqui impostos distintos para prestação de serviços e para venda de mercadorias. Temos outros tributos, evidentemente. Temos dois tributos, sim, que incidem independentemente de a receita ser de serviços ou de venda, mas são as contribuições PIS e COFINS, e não vou entrar nesse campo. Os impostos que gravam diretamente serviços e vendas são dois separados e com competências tributárias distintas. E, no caso do Brasil, ainda criando problemas de pretensão tributária entre mais de um município, quando se trata de incidência do imposto sobre serviços, ou de mais de um estado, quando se trata de venda de mercadorias. Temos também alguns problemas de saber, que é o que foi discutido ontem, se isto é ou não é serviço, ou é ou não é venda de mercadoria. Ontem, o meu querido amigo e professor Sérgio André, que está escondido lá atrás, acabei de descobrir que você está aí, Sérgio. Podia chegar mais perto. Não vou jogar bolinha de papel em você, não. Mas o Sérgio, ontem, ele fez uma acusação aos tributaristas brasileiros, que ele chamou de tributaristas médios, né? Eu queria dizer o seguinte: já discuti isso com o Sérgio tantas vezes. Nós conhecíamos duas classificações de tributaristas no Brasil: os tradicionais e os pós-modernistas, ou também chamados uns de formalistas e outros de substantivistas. Ontem nós descobrimos a existência de uma nova categoria, os tributaristas de porte médio. Eu queria dizer para você, Sérgio, que, sem brincadeira, eu queria dizer para você que, desde que o Código Civil de 2002 veio a se integrar no nosso ordenamento jurídico, eu me impressionei muito e me guio muito pelo conceito de função social e econômica dos negócios jurídicos. Lembrando que negócio jurídico não é uma coisa que foi criada, inventada pelo legislador. Negócio jurídico é a regulação jurídica para as transações que as pessoas fazem na vida do dia a dia. O que é a função econômica ou social de um contrato, de um negócio jurídico? É aquilo que nós chamamos de causa objetiva, causa de atribuição patrimonial, e que nada mais é menos do que os efeitos de um determinado contrato. Ou até eu posso visualizar a causa comparando a prestação de um contrato e a sua contraprestação. Então, para ser simples, quando eu transfiro a propriedade de uma coisa que é a prestação, a minha prestação, e a parte contrária, que recebe a propriedade, me paga um preço, é a contraprestação que ela me paga, eu identifico aí a causa do contrato. A função do contrato é transferir a propriedade mediante o pagamento do preço. E eu poderia dar 500 exemplos. para todos os contratos que estão no Código Civil. O que nós estamos vendo hoje com a economia digital? Nós estamos vendo manifestações novas, formas de manifestação, ou formas de nos trazerem as mesmas coisas que sempre existiram. Eu vou dar 2 exemplos. Um exemplo é o contrato de transporte. A minha avó, que nasceu no século XIX, quando ela nasceu, se transportava as mercadorias de um lugar para o outro mediante tração animal. Era assim que era. Não existia veículos, não havia veículos automotores, não havia locomotivas a vapor. Aliás, antes dela, as mercadorias eram transportadas no tempo da escravatura no Brasil, muito tempo antes dela, no lombo dos escravos. Não é? Mudou alguma coisa? Não. Se alguém se compromete a levar essa mercadoria daqui para lá, na carroça, ou no trem elétrico, ou no trem a diesel, é a mesma coisa. Hoje, nós temos maneiras de transporte diferentes. Nós temos UBS, Federal Express, mas são formas novas que os negócios estão sendo feitos. Lá nos Estados Unidos se transporta determinadas entregas por drones, não é? Quem sabe no futuro alguém vai inventar uma maneira de desmaterializar este copo com água e materializar lá no João, que eu estou mandando entregar o copo para o João Bianco. Tá certo? Houve alguma diferença? Não? Né? Se quem fez esse transporte dessa forma tão inovadora, daqui para lá, me cobrar, é um contrato de transporte. Né? Outro exemplo, eu acho que há uns 12 ou 13 anos atrás, o ministro Eros Grau decidiu monocraticamente que livro eletrônico não era livro. No Brasil, os livros são imunes de tributação. Se não houvesse a imunidade, eles seriam tributados provavelmente pelo imposto de vendas, ou que é o nosso imposto, o ICMS, o imposto de circulação de mercadorias. O Supremo levou, dessa decisão inicial do Eros Grau, mais de 10 anos para reconhecer que o livro eletrônico é livro, sim senhor, prefeito da imunidade. Porque a maneira de apresentar o livro é que mudou, mas a coisa ficou a mesma. Olha, por favor, todo mundo olha para isso que eu tenho na mão aqui. Eu vou mostrar dos 2 lados para todo mundo saber do que se trata. É um iPhone, né? Todo mundo está pensando, é o telefone do Ricardo. É o meu telefone. Mas não é só meu telefone. Ele é meu livro. Eu não leio mais em papel. Eu leio tudo aqui. Eu não tenho nem iPad, porque eu gosto de levar o meu livro aqui no meu bolsinho. Mas ele é livro do mesmo jeito. Quando eu compro, aliás, eu não saio daqui para comprar. Né? Eu entro lá no site da Amazon, ou como é que chama mesmo? Preciso consultar aqui. Né? Compro o livro, desce para mim. Houve alguma entrega? Houve entrega, sim. Se for cobrado por esse transporte de entrega, é uma forma de entrega. Vocês estão pensando que isso aqui é só um telefone, só um livro? Não, é uma biblioteca. Porque eu tenho aqui armazenado muitos livros. Nós temos na saída aqui no corredor uma biblioteca dos livros da USP. Se nós olharmos para o outro lado da rua, um prédio inteiro que é a biblioteca da Faculdade de Direito. Mas aqui dentro eu tenho uma biblioteca. Qual é a minha diferença entre os livros que eu tenho aqui e os livros que estão daquelas estantes? Nenhuma, são livros. Da mesma forma que aquilo era transporte. Então, na verdade, quando nós temos uma negociação, alguma coisa ocorre no mundo negocial, econômico, a regulação jurídica que precisa haver, nós estamos num Estado de Direito em que você não pega a caneta aqui do Gilberto e leva para casa. Ou ele me dá, ou eu compro dele. ou ele não aceita e fica com ele, ou sai daqui sem a caneta. Mas eu, para ter algum direito sobre essa caneta, eu tenho que me submeter às respectivas regras jurídicas. Não é? Então, o que eu queria simplificar dizendo isto, na verdade, se nós tentarmos identificar a causa de cada um desses negócios, nós vamos saber se nós estamos perante uma prestação de serviço ou uma venda de mercadoria. Lembrando a todos aqui, para os brasileiros, que a definição de mercadoria está no Código Civil, qualquer bem móvel que é adquirido com a intenção de revenda. É adquirido não para uso, mas com o intuito comercial. Bom, isto já faz uma distinção para a tributação aqui de ISS ou ICMS. Agora nós vamos voltar um pouco, passar para... É para cá? Não, para o outro lado. Nós vamos passar para a diferença entre serviço, e aproximando bastante da Convenção Modelo da OSD, ou da Convenção Modelo das Nações Unidas, vamos chegar a uma outra questão. Nós sabemos que isso é serviço. Né? O que é serviço? Quando alguém presta uma utilidade para outrem, que não seja uma mercadoria, e paga por isso. É a causa do contrato de prestação de serviço, a sua função. Não é? Se nós contratarmos o serviço de advocacia do Gilberto, é um contrato de prestação de serviço. Ele presta e adquire o direito de cobrar o serviço que ele prestou. Agora, nós temos que tratar de uma diferença dentro da espécie serviço, ou do gênero serviço, das duas espécies, serviço puro e simples, e serviço técnico, que, como foi mencionado pela professora Cana, é objeto do artigo 12A, recente artigo 12A da Convenção Modelo das Nações Unidas. Aliás, a propósito, o professor Andrés Baez tem um artigo bastante avantajado e detalhado sobre esse artigo, sobre este artigo 12A. Por que eu estou trazendo essa distinção? Porque no Brasil, voltando um pouquinho antes da questão da tributação na fonte, nós temos uma distinção entre serviços técnicos e serviços gerais na legislação do imposto de renda corporativo, que é aquela limitação de até 5% da receita líquida dos produtos fabricados mediante o emprego de um direito protegido por patente ou de uma informação técnica, administrativa, científica ou semelhante. Então, nós sintetizamos a segunda coisa como sendo assistência técnica. Como é que nós identificamos uma coisa da outra? Eu preciso dizer também que, dentro desse conceito que separa royalty, que é a remuneração de direitos de propriedade industrial, devidamente patenteados ou registrados no Instituto Nacional de Propriedade Industrial, e prestação de serviços técnicos, como é que nós distinguimos uma coisa da outra? Geralmente se fala royalty para cobrir tudo, não é? Na verdade, a nossa lei ela tem condições comuns para a dedução da despesa de royalty ou de assistência técnica e algumas condições que são apenas para a prestação de serviços técnicos, como, por exemplo, a limitação da prestação de assistência técnica somente nos primeiros 5 anos, geram despesas dedutíveis. Dali para frente, eu posso pedir uma extensão, mas se não conseguir, a despesa fica não dedutível. Então, eu tenho que separar uma coisa de outra. Por outro lado, eu tenho serviços técnicos que não são enquadrados nessa categoria de assistência técnica. Já ficou bastante assentado em jurisprudência e doutrina que os serviços que estão abrangidos, serviços técnicos que estão abrangidos por essas normas de indedutibilidade ou limitação de dedutibilidade, e é preciso também lembrar que existem limitações ou impedimentos para remessas de pagamentos de determinados royalties. Eles podem ser pagos dentro do Brasil, não geram despesas dedutíveis, mas não podem ser remetidos para controladoras ou a empresa controladora, ou a que a gente chama parent company, não é? Então, essa distinção tem múltiplas implicações na legislação brasileira. O que é considerado assistência técnica sujeita a estas limitações, né, são aquelas decorrentes de serviços cujo know-how, cuja expertise é transferida do provedor da assistência técnica para o adquirente. Não é, então, uma simples prestação de serviço. A assistência técnica que é sujeita a essas normas é aquela em que o adquirente passa a explorar aquele conhecimento na sua atividade, que é muito diferente. Eu posso contratar um serviço técnico para consertar um veículo, não tem nada com isso, mas se eu contrato um serviço técnico para saber fabricar o meu produto, eu adquiri o know-how e estou sujeito a essas regras. Quando nós vamos para a tributação do imposto de renda na fonte, eu vou me limitar aqui a colocar como beneficiário do pagamento e provedor da assistência técnica alguém residente no exterior, pode ser uma pessoa física ou jurídica. Eu vou me abstrair aqui de situações de estabelecimento permanente, não há estabelecimento permanente, não estou na regra dos 183 dias, é um residente, uma pessoa física ou jurídica residente no exterior e que produz o trabalho no exterior, não aqui dentro. Nós temos uma tributação para prestação de serviço, tributação incidência do imposto de renda na fonte, sobre remuneração de serviços, de 25%. É a regra geral. Entretanto, se tratar de serviços técnicos, há uma redução de 10%. Aí nós vamos novamente entrar nessa discussão. O que é serviço técnico? O que está abrangido por essa redução? Apenas o serviço que transfere a tecnologia ou o serviço de qualquer natureza, transferindo ou não a tecnologia, mas que exija alguma especialização, que seria uma definição mínima de serviço técnico, aquele que exija uma especialização mínima. Eu vou voltar um pouquinho a essa questão logo adiante. Em contrapartida, essa redução de 5%, de 10%, nós temos um tributo, que é uma contribuição de intervenção no domínio econômico, chamado CID, que nós chamamos de CID Royalties, que é destinado, pelo menos legalmente, é destinado a incrementar as pesquisas e a inovação no Brasil. Então, se eu presto algum serviço considerado técnico, eu tenho uma redução no imposto de renda na fonte para 25%, de 25% para 15%, mas tem que pagar a CID de 10%. O meu ônus é a mesma coisa, 10%. Mas há uma diferença. Aqui não se questiona se o serviço sujeito à CID é serviço que transfere tecnologia ou não. Na verdade, a legislação começou abrangendo royalties e transferência de tecnologia, mas foi sendo alargada e hoje todo e qualquer serviço técnico é sujeito à CID. Aí, com relação à CID, o tempo é muito curto, infelizmente, mas eu chamaria a atenção de duas coisas. A primeira é que, com relação ao imposto de renda na fonte, pode haver o gross-up, se a fonte assumir o encargo econômico do imposto de renda devido. Por quê? Porque o imposto é devido por aquele que prestou o serviço e que é remunerado. A CID não. A CID, na concepção legal, embora ela incida sobre o mesmo fato, ela é concebida como uma contribuição que é encargo do próprio recebedor do serviço técnico, e por isso ele não gera gross-up. Nem se questiona isso. Há uma dúvida que se discute aqui, se a CID representou uma quebra das convenções assinadas pelo Brasil. As convenções assinadas pelo Brasil seguem o modelo da OCDE, tem variáveis, mas segue o modelo. Elas permitem a tributação do imposto de renda na fonte sobre serviços técnicos recebidos, que é o artigo 12, né? Mas com limitações. A pergunta é, 15% de imposto de renda na fonte está sujeito aos limites dos tratados ou 15 mais 10? Em outra pergunta, supondo que a limitação seja de 15%, como existem casos, o 10% é uma quebra indireta do tratado? É ou não? Os que defendem que não é, se valem dessas características específicas desse tributo, que é o fato de que ele incide não sobre o recebedor do pagamento, mas o recebedor do serviço, e, portanto, não é imposto de renda, mesmo observando-se a definição de imposto de renda que os tratados dão, ou dos impostos que são abrangidos pelas convenções. O tempo está encerrado, eu queria apenas me referir ao artigo 12 e ao 12A, rapidissimamente. A professora Cana já falou tudo que tinha que falar sobre os dois artigos, eu só vou dizer como é que nós encaramos os dois artigos, acho que você já falou rapidamente de passagem. O Superior Tribunal de Justiça decidiu que serviços técnicos não podem se submeter à tributação no Brasil, ainda que a convenção com um determinado país permita a incidência com um limite. O Superior Tribunal de Justiça entendeu que, deixa eu projetar aí para vocês, a tecnologia aqui não é muito boa, mas, de qualquer forma, o Superior Tribunal de Justiça entendeu que isso se trata de renda da empresa no exterior. Vamos voltar ao que eu disse no começo, eu estou tratando de serviço prestado lá fora, sem estabelecimento permanente, não tem pessoas físicas no Brasil, né? É um caso típico de serviço prestado no exterior. A pergunta é sujeito ao artigo 12? No princípio, a gente diria sim, claro que é sujeito ao artigo 12. O artigo 12, lembrando rapidamente, além de royalties, que são, na nossa concepção, a remuneração de direitos de propriedade industrial, mas também aqui nós temos filmes e outros casos, né? Filmes cinematográficos, ele também é definido no artigo 12 como informação referente à experiência industrial, comercial ou científica. Então, isso caía perfeitamente dentro do nosso conceito de serviço técnico e também, evidentemente, de serviço de assistência técnica. Mas o STJ entendeu que não, que isso é que o artigo aplicável é o artigo 7, que é o lucro das empresas, e que, portanto, não pode haver incidência no Brasil. Certo ou errado, e apesar de não serem muitas as decisões, é uma orientação jurisprudencial que já foi adotada pela própria Receita Federal. Essa questão está pacificada, portanto. E, por fim, o artigo 12A. O que fez o 12A, como já foi explicado? 12A da Convenção das Nações Unidas. Separou royalties, propriamente dito, direitos de propriedade industrial e outros semelhantes, dos serviços técnicos. Separou. Mas, se nós formos ler a definição, lá no parágrafo 3 do artigo 12A, nós vamos verificar que é muito próxima daquela que nós lemos no artigo 12 da Convenção Modelo da OCDE. Entende-se por serviços técnicos qualquer pagamento em consideração de serviços de natureza administrativa, técnica ou consultiva. Aí tem as exclusões, que nós não estamos na exclusão, já falei que são quando a pessoa está aqui por 180 dias, etc. Não é o caso. Essa definição é uma definição que pressupõe que nós entendamos que o serviço técnico é um serviço que não está ao alcance de qualquer pessoa fazer. Não é fazer um ovo frito. Claro que quem é cozinheiro faz ovo frito melhor que eu. E melhor acho que você também. Com certeza. Tá bom? Mas qualquer um de nós faz ovo frito. Né? Agora, entender de imposto de renda precisa ter alguma especialização, alguns anos de estudo. Né? Bom, se nós entendemos isso como serviço técnico, na verdade, é uma remoção do que estava no artigo 12 para o artigo 12A. O que significa que, na nossa perspectiva, e na perspectiva do STJ brasileiro, não haveria possibilidade de incidência, porque o artigo aplicável seria o 7º, lucro da empresa prestadora. Muito obrigado.
Agradeço ao professor Ricardo. Posso dizer que, se, dependendo do preço, eu vendo aqui a caneta, sem nenhum problema.
Não tem problema.
Bom, eu queria já passar a palavra ao professor Vikram para fazer os seus comentários.
So I don't have any slides, so I don't need this. So I give this back to you. Now, India is very famous for withholding taxes. India does impose withholding taxes on interest, royalties, as well as technical services. With respect, so I'll keep the discussion on interest outside the scope of this panel. With respect to royalties, the domestic law definition of royalties is really broad in India. And that being said, with respect to in the treaty policy, the Indian treaty definition of royalty is very much similar to that found in the UN model, as opposed to the OECD model, because the definition of royalties in the OECD model is much narrower than the one in the UN model. So India, in majority of its treaties, follows the definition of royalties as contained in the UN model. So one of the biggest issues that has been disputed in India with respect to the royalties article is payments with respect to software-related payments. Now, just to give you an example, the whole issue here is with respect to off-the-shelf software or standardized software. So for example, when you make a payment to buy a Microsoft Word software for your own computer, now whether that payment is a royalty or not. Now, the OECD has a clear view on this, the UN has a clear view on this. The issue is with respect to, are you paying for a copyright or a copyrighted article? So if you are paying for a copyrighted article, then that payment does not constitute royalty, because you're not getting anything. It's just like a product or a book or that you're obtaining. So that's one of the biggest disputed issues in India. Actually, the domestic law of India is written in such a way that royalties for standardized software also, payments for standardized software constitutes royalties. But the treaties have a very narrower definition, and in India, the taxpayer can choose between the domestic law or the treaty, and here the treaty would prevail. So payments for shrink-wrapped software should not really classify as royalty for treaty purposes. So there should be no withholding taxes in India on software-related payments with respect to off-the-shelf software. Now, that's with respect to royalties. With respect to fees for technical services, once again, the domestic law of India is very broad. It says that any payment made by an Indian resident towards fees for consultancy, managerial, or technical services is subject to withholding taxes in India. And with respect to the treaty policy, the OECD model does not have a fees for technical service clause. So till the extent the treaty does not have a fees for technical service clause, there's an issue which pops up. It's an interpretation issue, is that when someone is providing, let's say, a technical service from outside India to an Indian recipient, and the Indian recipient is paying for that, and the treaty does not include a fees for technical services clause. So where would the income fit in? Would it fit in Article 7, which deals with business profits, or it fits in Article 21, which deals with other income? Because in some treaties, which India has concluded, the other income article follows the UN model, which gives the right to tax to the state of source if the income is classified as other income. So that's an issue that is being litigated, and there is unfortunately a ruling by the advanced ruling, by Authority for Advanced Ruling in India, which says that it fits into other income. But if it goes a bit higher to the higher courts, I'm pretty sure that the higher courts will say that it fits into Article 7. Again, with respect to fees for technical services at the level of treaty, the implementation of the article at the level of treaties in the Indian treaty network, it has been quite, let's say, non-uniform. there's no consistency with respect to the approach of implementation of technical services in the Indian treaty policy. Just to give you some examples, the treaty with Mauritius does not contain a fees for technical services clause. The treaty with Canada and the US contains a fees for technical services clause, but it is included in the article that deals with royalties. That being said, in these treaties, with the treaties with Canada and USA, there is a concept known as make available. It's like fees for included services. So between technical services, you have fees for technical services, which is the catch-all phrase, and then that has to be interpreted a bit more narrowly, which is known as fees for included services, or services which make available certain technology to the service recipient. So that's another way it has been implemented in the Indian treaty policy, and there are many other treaties which also just say any fees that you pay for consultancy, managerial, or technical services is subject to tax in India. So the implementation, so the point here that I'm trying to make is that the implementation of the fees for technical services clause in the Indian treaty network is non-uniform. And you really have to look at the wording of each treaty in order to understand whether payment from India with respect to consultancy, managerial, or technical fees can be classified in Article 7, Article 12, or a new article that deals with fees for technical services or other income. So you have to be really careful when you're working with fees for technical services as well as the royalty definition. Just to give you some statistics, the amount of case law on royalties and fees for technical services, on articles dealing with royalties and fees for technical services from Indian courts is substantial. I believe right now there are more than 100 cases, and really there are more than 100 cases on these two articles itself that have been decided by Indian courts. And I have a summary of all these cases in case you're interested in reading this from a Brazilian point of view. If it helps you to interpret some treaty articles, I'll be more than happy to share that document with you. Okay, so I stop here. Thank you.
Obrigado, professor Vikram. O professor Ricardo queria fazer apenas um pequeno comentário aqui.
Não, eu queria só complementar. Sérgio, olha mais essa aqui que eu lembrei agora. Isso aqui também fala no telefone. Mas você acredita que ele faz permuta? Olha que coisa extraordinária. A Kindle Books, eu sou assinante, tenho a minha biblioteca Kindle aqui dentro. De vez em quando ela me oferece sem eu pedir. Você quer trocar um livro da sua biblioteca? Eu te dou esse. E você me dá qualquer um que você tenha. Que contrato é esse? Permuta, né? Se eu tenho alguém que armazena essa minha biblioteca, eu falei que era uma biblioteca, mas ele está fazendo o quê? Está alocando espaço em algum lugar, na nuvem pode ser, mas está alocando espaço, né? É uma coisa extraordinária, viu? Mas é uma maneira diferente das mesmas coisas, penso eu assim, né? O Uber é igualzinho em qualquer lugar do mundo. Você usa isso aqui também para chamar Uber lá nos Estados Unidos, na Europa, em qualquer lugar. Entretanto, o Uber, cada país, nós vimos isso ontem, tem uma visão diferente dessa prestação de serviço, né? Muito obrigado, viu? Desculpa.
Professor Brewster, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's do an exercise or homework for Ricardo. He has explained about the Berlin case or explanation about the technical service fee in this new era. But this reminded me of the old case in 1994. There's a anti-avoidance, not anti-avoidance, it's a tax dispute between the American satellite company with the Beijing tax authority. So the ASC, that is the American satellite company, concluded a contract of service fee with the local TV station company. And in 1999, the tax authority of Beijing local, they asked the ASC to file a tax return on this service. and there is dispute. And I want to know if the case today, what is maybe the final result according to your view on the Brazilian explanation or interpretation or application of the rules? The case fact is clear? Very simple.
Eu entendi que é serviço.
There is an American satellite company. Signed a contract with the Beijing television station for using his satellite channel something. Yeah, and they don't have to go to stay in Beijing. They just yeah.
So American Satellite está situado fora de Beijing. Cairia dentro do conceito de aqui no Brasil, né? Se fosse no Brasil, cairia dentro do conceito de serviço sujeito a imposto de 25% na fonte, que seria reduzido para 15%, e aí haveria incidência da contribuição de intervenção econômica de 10%.
Okay, you will use the royalty article, right? Not Article 7, the business profit.
Não, vamos lá. O royalty, nós entendemos no Brasil o royalty como sendo a consideração ao pagamento pelo uso de direitos de propriedade industrial, patentes, marcas e outros direitos de propriedade industrial, separadamente de serviços técnicos. Na convenção modelo da OCDE, as duas espécies de remuneração estão subordinadas ao artigo 12, né? Como título geral de royalty. Estaria nesse artigo a remuneração para American Satellite, mas, de acordo com a decisão do STJ, não poderia ser tributada no Brasil. STJ é o Superior Tribunal do Brasil, não poderia ser tributada no Brasil porque é rendimento da empresa no exterior, tributado apenas no país onde ela está sediada.
Okay, maybe that is clear. You are using the compromised withholding tax rate at 10%. This is Article 7. It's not the royalty because you waived your right to tax using this Article 12 of royalty. Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. There's another element in this case of dispute because in China, the domestic law, we don't have this royalty payment. It's we use that under the rent service fee. So this involves the legal the choice of law between the international tax law or the domestic law. So finally, the tax authority they use the domestic the article about the rent fee to charge the tax from the ASC, American Satellite Company. But I think today the case will not be a case. It's easily understood that the local tax authority can levy some tax on this kind of technical service or whatever. So it's easily understood. But it's 20 years ago. So it's a very debated case. Okay, thank you.
O problema é que nós temos esse compromisso de horário com a faculdade.
Obrigado, professor Brista. Passo a palavra ao professor Victor para as suas considerações.
Well, thank you. Well, you received from me a lot of information about Russian taxation and international taxation, which may look like certain mess, sometimes funny mess. But before coming to taxation of services, I would like to say something important, which may help you to understand what's going on in Russia. You see, if a man survived a serious, insult, sometimes he just doesn't demonstrate any move. He cannot talk anything. At certain moment, well, you see a couple of fingers start to move. Other fingers. Then a man starts to say something slowly. So, well, you see, it's recovery. It cannot be quick. And, well, in a couple of years, a man tries to, well, stand up and move. And if you look at this man, you might say, well, he's in a very bad position. But somebody will say, well, in a couple of years, we will not imagine that there was something bad with him. Russia is exactly in the same position. So after this collapse of the Soviet Union, well, you see, we did not demonstrate any move at all. Then, so we are recovering. And it is true in many areas, including taxation. So in some areas, we are very good. I mean, in taxation or even international taxation. Where tax authorities, state is concentrating, focusing in, there are real progress. And it's not what I say or Russians say, it is, well, acceptable by tax people from OECD. In some areas, we are among world leaders. In some areas, well, you see, we are not doing nothing. And it is particularly correct in respect of the taxation of services. You see, if you looked at general tax regime for services, from tax deductibility, well, almost all services are deductible if they are economically justified, let's say reasonable. We don't have any anti-income stripping rules in Russia. So generally, payments made to islands, BVIs, well, should be as well deductible as payments for services received from Europe. It makes services a very attractive instrument in international tax planning in Russia. If you looked at withholding tax side, well, we don't have a concept of service fee. You understand that the state, well, loses a lot in the absence of this concept. Also, we have wonderful, simple rule in the tax code saying, unless specially provided by the tax code, income from services and works is not taxable. It is not Russian source income. Full stop. Only services like insurance, transportation, a couple of others, triggers Russian withholding tax. Otherwise, tax authorities cannot do anything. So, services, payments for services are tax deductible, not subject to withholding tax. Well, paradise. But, well, tax authorities are not sitting and waiting. They try to do something. To challenge tax deductibility, well, it's possible to use standard transfer pricing mechanics, but it is difficult. It's painful. To challenge, well, withholding tax treatment, well, something should be invited by the tax authorities. And what tax authorities are doing, well, they're doing pretty obvious things. They try to requalify payments for requalify services, saying that actually there were no services. There was something else. What may be instead of services? Well, if it's a payment for affiliated person, in islands or in tax treaty jurisdiction, tax authorities may say that, well, try to say that, well, it is actually dividend. Or if it's payment for non-affiliated person, or it is difficult to present evidence that there is some special connection between these parties, tax authorities may say, well, it is just a gift, because when we investigate, well, the documentation, we see that, well, it does not look like there were real services. And, well, services from BVI, real services, any services. So tax authorities try to use Russian GAR to attack this. And nowadays it is pretty successful. But written law created like 18 years ago is not very helpful at the moment, and it is not very easy to change this. So this area, well, you see, authorities are suffering, and we don't have even very simple and common anti-avoidance rules in respect of services. But you see, authorities are doing something, and I think that in this area and some other areas which I covered in my speeches, well, it is just question of time when state will concentrate on this, focus in, and change something. So we are in a stage of recovery. So don't say that Russian tax system is like good or bad. It is just in a transition or in a recovery period. Thank you for tolerating me these 2 wonderful days sitting in the panel. Thank you.
Obrigado, professor Victor. E já passo a palavra diretamente para a professora Jennifer, porque já estamos acima do nosso limite de tempo aqui.
Thank you, Gilberto. I'll be quite brief. I'm sure you all have had enough for today, so won't take much of your time. In connection with services, there's just some peculiarities that happened in South Africa, which might be interesting. Basically, the normal source rules apply where services are rendered, so where the services are rendered. And we have very good case law going back many years on to support that concept of where the services are rendered. And this is because South Africa used to be on a source basis until 2001. And we really had very good case law to determine and find out where the origin of services are. And I think it might be a good idea now to go back to those cases in a lot of circumstances. The source rule is still valid, of course, for non-residents, because non-residents are taxed on South African source income. So they are still, relevant. Now, we do have, when we changed over to a resident system, we did introduce deemed source rules for certain kinds of income. For example, for interest, for royalties, for know-how or show-how, performance, entertainment, and sports persons, and technical industrial services. The withholding tax rate is 15% on these items, and there is a reduction in terms of some of the treaties. So that is where we are at the moment, and most of our South African treaties do not have a technical services article at all. There might be, I think there's one that I know of in particular with an African country, but the others do not. If we look at taxation of services, in 2015 and 2016, the revenue authorities attempted to introduce a withholdings tax on services. And it had a future implementation date. So the legislation was written, but it was only to come into effect in 2017, last year. And it referred to technical, management, and consulting services from a South African source paid to a non-resident. Now, the reason given for the introduction of that was because of potential erosion of the tax base, wanted to tax this at source. However, we know that this was associated with the difficulty of locating a PE and establishing whether there was a PE in South Africa. And they thought this was a way where it would make it a little bit easier to do this detection. Anyway, it was repealed just before implementation date in 2017, and it was considered to be not in good faith in terms of the treaties. So that was the basic reason. So what they did is they introduced an alternative to this because they still didn't want to let it go. And the alternative was that they included these kinds of transactions as reportable arrangements. So now there's a whole list of reportable arrangements which have to be declared on the tax return, and they have to give quite a lot of detail. Now, I've put the wording up there on the slide. It's probably too small to read, but I just want to highlight certain aspects of it. An arrangement for the rendering of consultancy, construction, engineering, installation, logistical, managerial, supervisory, technical, or training services to a South African resident for the rendering of services by a non-resident, essentially. So it's quite wide. The difficulty is to knowing when to report and not to report. Does it fall under on the list or not? So sometimes it's just reported whether it's going to fit or not. Now, what is interesting here is that, and that's why this to me is evident of trying to detect a PE as such, is because it rendered arrangement where the non-resident is or is anticipated to be physically present in South Africa. So that to me sort of is, they want to find out something more is going on from the source country. So that is what we have, which is reportable. Fortunately, they've put a threshold on it, so only transactions which are over 10 million need to be reported. If it's under that, you don't have to worry about it. So I think they've sort of still feel quite happy that they've got something in place. And the purpose of the reportable arrangements provision is it can lead to audits, it can lead to exchange of information, and it can lead to transfer pricing issues which they might be able to pick up. And so that's a way around the situation. And but it remains in South Africa that the PE issue still is of concern to the revenue authorities. So, and in conclusion, I would just like to thank you all for your attention, for being here. So, thank you.
Bom, sem mais delongas, devido ao já são 6h10, então eu encerro esse painel e, mais uma vez, parabenizando a organização pelos excelentes temas, excelentes palestrantes e até amanhã.